John Joseph Gotti wasn't born into wealth or power. He came from the rough streets of South Bronx, one of 13 children in a poor Italian-American family. His father worked as a day laborer. The pay was low and the anger was high. From a young age, Gotti hated being poor. He saw crime not as evil, but as a shortcut to respect. The streets became his classroom, and the mob became his dream. By his teens, Gotti was already running with small-time street crews. He stole cars, hijacked trucks, and learned how to keep his mouth shut. One thing stood out: his confidence. He talked like a man twice his age and carried himself like he already ruled the block. Older gangsters noticed. They liked the kid's guts and his temper. Gotti joined a local street gang known as the Fulton Rockaway Boys. They were rough, loyal, and fearless. He earned his reputation by fighting anyone who disrespected him. To John, violence wasn't personal. It was business. He learned that fear was better than friendship in the underworld. At 16, Gotti's mugshot hit the police files for the first time. It wouldn't be the last. He got caught stealing a cement mixer, but even then, he showed no fear. Police said the young man smirked during questioning. That smirk would later become famous. The smirk of a man who believed no one could touch him. In the late 1950s, Gotti met men who would change his life forever. Soldiers from the Gambino crime family. They were part of New York's biggest mafia empire. To young Gotti, they were gods. They wore silk suits, drove Cadillacs, and spoke softly but carried the power of bullets. He wanted to be one of them. Not just a street thug, but a made man. Della Croce was different from other mobsters. Quiet, serious, loyal. He saw potential in Gotti. Under his mentorship, John learned the code of the mafia. Respect, silence, and obedience. Della Croce taught him that killing wasn't for pleasure. It was for order. And that trust was more valuable than money. For years, Gotti carried those lessons like scripture. In 1973, Gotti was ordered to handle a problem. James McBratney, a man who had kidnapped a mobster's relative. Gotti didn't hesitate. He and 2 others ambushed McBratney in a Staten Island bar. 3 shots ended it. It was Gotti's first known killing, and his first step toward becoming a legend. Gotti served time for that killing, but didn't lose respect. Inside, he kept his dignity, never snitched, never complained. When he got out, the Gambinos welcomed him back with open arms. He had proven himself. He wasn't just another soldier. He was a rising name. Gotti took command of the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Ozone Park, Queens. That small clubhouse became the heart of his empire. He ran gambling, loan sharking, and hijacking operations with ruthless discipline. His men called him Johnny Boy, and they'd follow him anywhere. The FBI called him dangerous. They were both right. Most mobsters stayed low-key, but not Gotti. He dressed like a movie star. Silk ties, expensive cologne, hand-tailored suits. He spoke boldly, smiled easily, and tipped waiters with $100 bills. People called him the Dapper Don. But beneath the style was a man ready to kill anyone who stood in his way. Gotti wasn't just loyal to the Gambinos. He was loyal to blood. He brought his brothers into his crew, turning family into business. Frank, Gene, Peter, all had roles in his growing network. To Gotti, trust came only from family. But in the mafia, family ties can be both strength and curse. During the 1970s, Gotti became a master of hijacking trucks at JFK Airport. Anything that moved, whiskey, jewelry, electronics, became his profit. Each job was planned like a military operation, and each success made his name louder inside the Mafia Commission. He wasn't just a street boss anymore. He was becoming a kingmaker. At the top of the Gambino family sat Paul Castellano. Big Paul. He ran the family like a businessman, not a gangster. He hated street violence and flashy behavior. Gotti, on the other hand, loved both. The tension between them grew like a ticking bomb. Sooner or later, it would explode. In 1980, tragedy hit Gotti's family. His 12-year-old son, Frank Gotti, was killed in a car accident by a neighbor, John Favara. At first, the death seemed accidental, but months later, Favara disappeared. Forever. No body, no arrest, no trace. Everyone knew what had happened. It was Gotti's way of saying, even grief answers to power. Gotti grew impatient under Castellano's leadership. Castellano wanted peace and money. Gotti wanted respect and fear. When Castellano ignored Della Croce's funeral in 1985, Gotti took it personally. He saw it as an insult to the man who had raised him. That day, Gotti decided Castellano had to go. Gotti gathered his closest allies, Sammy Gravano, Frank DeCicco, and Angelo Ruggiero. They talked in whispers, always fearing bugs, always watching shadows. The plan was dangerous. Killing a boss without permission was a death sentence. But Gotti believed destiny favored the bold. He said, "Either we run the family, or we die trying." December 16th, 1985, Manhattan. Paul Castellano arrived at Sparks Steakhouse for a meeting. Before he reached the door, gunfire erupted. Castellano and his driver dropped dead on the snowy sidewalk. Witnesses screamed. By the time police arrived, the killers had vanished. That night, John Gotti became the new boss of the Gambino crime family. The media went wild. Cameras followed Gotti everywhere. His suits, his smiles, his swagger. He walked into courtrooms like red carpets. He didn't hide from fame. He danced with it. Reporters called him the Dapper Don. The name stuck, and so did the image of a mobster who looked like a movie star. Gotti moved his headquarters to the Ravenite Social Club in Little Italy. It became his fortress: marble floors, fine cigars, expensive whiskey. Every night, his men gathered there, waiting for orders. Police cars parked nearby, listening, watching. But Gotti laughed. He'd say, "If they're gonna follow me, they might as well get good seats." By the late 1980s, Gotti ruled the Gambinos with absolute power. He controlled labor unions, construction, drugs, and extortion rackets worth billions. Everyone feared him, from Brooklyn to Manhattan. But he wasn't quiet like other bosses. He wanted to be seen, respected, adored. That pride would become his downfall. Gotti's fame made him a target for the FB. They bugged his clubs, followed his lieutenants, and built massive cases. But time after time, he walked free. Juries were bribed, witnesses vanished, evidence disappeared. The public began calling him the Teflon Don, because nothing stuck. Not murder, not racketeering, not conspiracy. Gotti's neighborhood loved him. He paid rent for struggling families, handed out cash at Christmas, and kept drugs off local streets. Old ladies blessed him. Kids admired him. To Queens, he wasn't a criminal. He was a hero in a $1,000 suit. But inside his empire, cracks appeared. Angelo Ruggiero, his old friend, was caught on wiretaps insulting Gotti. Others whispered about money, greed, and jealousy. In the mafia, betrayal is a seed that grows fast, and Gotti's empire was becoming a forest of lies. Salvatore, Sammy the Bull, Gravano became Gotti's underboss, smart, loyal, and deadly, the perfect soldier. Together, they rebuilt the family's business with military precision. But power breeds paranoia. And Gotti's arrogance made enemies. Even among his own men, unbeknownst to Gotti, the FBI had installed secret bugs inside the Ravenite Club. Every conversation, every order, every whisper was being recorded. For months, agents listened to the Dapper Don talk about hits, money, and betrayal. He loved hearing himself speak. Those tapes would destroy him. Agents worked tirelessly, transcribing hours of secret recordings. On some tapes, Gotti's voice could be heard approving hits, talking about how certain problems were handled. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough. Federal prosecutors began building what they called the case of the century. They wanted Gotti's empire to burn. In December 1990, the inevitable happened. Gotti was arrested. Again. But this time, it was serious. Cameras surrounded the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions. Gotti walked through the crowd smiling as if it were another movie premiere to the world. He looked calm. But inside, he knew. This was a battle he might not win. While awaiting trial, Gotti made a mistake that would cost him everything. He underestimated Sammy the Bull. The FBI approached Sammy with an offer. Testify against Gotti and save your life. At first, he refused. But when he learned Gotti had been secretly blaming him for murders on the tapes, Sammy broke the code of silence. He turned state witness. It was the ultimate betrayal. In 1992, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, FBI agents, and curious citizens filled every seat. Gotti arrived in a perfect suit, hair slicked back, smiling as always. But the evidence was overwhelming. FBI tapes, testimonies, and years of investigation finally came together. The jury found him guilty on all charges: murder, racketeering, and conspiracy. The Dapper Don had fallen. Gotti was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. When the verdict was read, he showed no emotion. He adjusted his tie, looked at the judge, and nodded. That was his final act of defiance. In that moment, the man who once ruled New York became just another inmate in a concrete box. Inside prison, Gotti remained powerful. Inmates respected him. Guards feared him. Even from behind bars, he still received visitors, letters, and messages from the outside world. His influence didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Some said he ran operations from prison. Others said he simply missed the life he once lived. Without Gotti's leadership, the Gambino family fractured rivals fought for control, and the FBI continued their crackdown. What was once a disciplined organization turned into chaos. The golden age of the mafia in New York began to fade, replaced by fear, betrayal, and modern surveillance. Gotti's family stayed loyal. His son, John Gotti Jr., tried to keep the family name alive, but every move was watched by the FBI. His wife, Victoria, refused to give interviews, keeping her pain private. To her, John was not the Dapper Don. He was a husband and father who lost himself to power. Over time, Gotti became more myth than man. Movies, books, and documentaries turned his life into legend. People argued about who he really was, a ruthless killer or a symbol of rebellion. But those who knew him said both were true. He could order a man's death in the morning and buy toys for children by afternoon. Even in prison, Gotti demanded respect. He wore pressed uniforms, polished shoes, and carried himself like a boss. Fellow inmates called him Mr. Gotti. He spent hours talking about honor, loyalty, and mistakes. But as the years passed, illness began to weaken him. Cancer doesn't fear reputation. In the late 1990s, Gotti was diagnosed with throat cancer. Prison doctors did what they could, but the disease spread fast. The once feared mob boss who terrified New York now struggled to speak. For a man whose voice commanded power, silence was the cruelest punishment. Family visits became his only joy. His daughter Victoria described how he tried to smile even when he was in pain. They'd talk about the old days, his suits, his cars, the laughter. But behind the glass, it was clear. The Dapper Don was fading away. On June 10th, 2002, John Gotti died in a federal medical prison in Missouri. He was 61. The news spread fast. Some celebrated, others mourned. To law enforcement, it was the end of an era. To his followers, it was the death of a legend. The Dapper Don was gone. But his story had only begun to echo. Even in death, Gotti made headlines. His funeral in Queens drew crowds like a celebrity event. Hundreds of limousines, roses, and mourners lined the streets. The FBI watched from a distance, taking photos. The streets he once ruled were now filled with silence and memory. John Gotti's legacy was complicated. Some called him a hero of the people, others, a ruthless murderer. But nobody denied his charisma. He turned the mafia into a spectacle. He was the last gangster to make organized crime look stylish, before technology and justice made it impossible. Sammy Gravano lived under witness protection, but his name never disappeared. He would later confess to 19 murders and walk free after serving a fraction of his sentence. To many old mobsters, that was unforgivable. The betrayal of John Gotti became one of the darkest chapters in mafia history. John Gotti Jr. tried to live a normal life, but the shadow of his father was too large. Every job, every friendship, every move came with suspicion. The FBI believed he was continuing the business. He denied it. But in truth, no Gotti could ever escape the name. With Gotti's death, the mafia lost its last superstar. The days of public bosses, open social clubs, and public respect were over. The new generation of gangsters hid in silence, learning from Gotti's mistakes. The Dapper Don's fall became their warning. Even decades later, documentaries, movies, and songs still mention him. Tourists visit the old Ravenite Club site in Little Italy. His face appears on posters, shirts, and memes. To the modern world, he's part of gangster folklore. A man who lived by fire and died by it, John Gotti's story is both glamorous and tragic. He rose from the poor streets of Brooklyn to rule America's most powerful crime family, only to lose it all to pride, betrayal, and law. His life reminds the world that power built on fear can never last forever. The Dapper Don may be gone, but his shadow still walks the streets of New York.